Great. We'll go ahead and begin. Good day, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are today. First of all, welcome and thank you so much for joining us today. I think we have a very interesting discussion ahead of us today, so I'm really looking forward to it. Our topic for today is efficiency at your fingertips. We're going to speak about the power of IT automation. We're going to, first of all, define that a little bit more and understand what that actually means. We're going to talk about some different ways that you can implement it. And of course, we also want to understand the benefits of IT automation for all IT professionals. Now, we do have a very special guest speaker with us. But before we dive in and before I introduce you, I do want to go over some general housekeeping. So first of all, I want to just inform you all that this webinar is being recorded. So if you have to leave early or if you want to share it afterwards with your friends or with your colleagues, then if you've registered for the webinar, you will receive a recorded link afterwards. In addition, we really want this to be a discussion and we want you guys to answer questions and to engage with myself and with John. So there is in this webinar a Q&A section. You can post any questions that you may have there. If there's anything which you would like us to address as we're going along, that's great. But we will also have dedicated time at the end for a Q&A session. So I really encourage you, if something comes up, to write a question in the question box and we will get to it. Great. So without further ado, I want to have some introductions over here. My name is Gilla Glazerson and I am a Sales Enablement Manager here at Atera. I've been at Atera for about 1.5 years now, and I've really worked extensively with customers to understand their needs and to help them reach their goals. And I've really seen how they can automate their processes in order to be more efficient and to really achieve their goals. I'm joined today by John Merrick. John, I would like you to introduce yourself and please also tell us a little bit about your experience in the industry.
Hi everyone. I say my name is John. I'm from S2S Media Group. We're basically content creators. We provide news stories and such like for the main newspapers and PR and various other things like that. I've been in the IT sector for pretty much all my career, to be honest with you, which is scarily approaching nearly 30 years. 16 years of that was in an MSP where we serviced a wide range of business sectors, as most MSPs do. I've used a number of PSAs and RMM solutions during that time, and we took on the Microsoft 365 since pretty much its introduction when it was called BPOS. So I've been around for quite a while, taken up recently, like I said, the automation handle and trying to implement that in my current role. A lot more. Talk about that a bit later on, I guess.
Yes, we will. I will just say, John, you've been in the IT industry for pretty much longer than I've been alive. So I'm sure you'll have
scary.
a lot of very interesting, information to share, and I really am looking forward to it. Great, and thank you for joining us, John. Okay, so
No
just
problem.
to go through our agenda, we will have a little bit of an introduction into what our topic is for today. We want to understand the importance of IT automation a little bit more, as well as define it a little bit more. And then we're really going to get some pro tips and tricks from John about how he implemented it and what he's done in his experience. We'll also, as part of that, go through some case studies, really to just get some real live examples. And as I mentioned, we will end off with a live Q&A. So let's dive right in. Now, the year is 2023, and we're all aware the economy is in a little bit of a downturn, and a lot of companies are really taking stock and they're taking a long, hard look at the processes that they already have in place. And one of the buzzwords that we're hearing more and more is efficiency. We're hearing a lot about the need for efficiency. So this could be to cut costs, to save money, or really ultimately people just want to do the most with what they have. And really, this is not something that's unique to the IT industry. It's something that we're hearing across the industry. But of course, IT, as always, has its own challenges and its own unique challenges. And it's clear that IT companies, whether it be MSPs, whether it be IT departments, IT consultants, they really are faced with their own share of challenges. So, John, based on your experience and with the current climate, I'm curious what you feel like the challenges are and where you feel that companies are trying to be more efficient.
Yeah, well, as you've touched on there, Gila, I mean, like efficiency is the key. I think that's possibly due to the huge number of the amount of data we've got to process these days now. The data's just getting more and more and more. And I'm a big believer in trying to use what you've got first before investing in more technology. There's a lot of stuff around in your existing software that many people don't use. And again, it's key as well to try to concentrate on sending the people to the data as opposed to the data to the people, because that way it makes things a lot easier to automate. If you're sending somebody to the same documents, the same information, as opposed to sending that information out to multiple people, it's much easier to control. So
Interesting.
that's some of the key things I think there is just processing more data and trying to do that as efficiently as we can.
Yeah. And as far as the climate or the economic climate, have you faced any particular challenges, whether it be hiring challenges or maybe building out your team or the way you're training teams?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, staffing, I've always found, as I've been in the IT support game for such a long time, I've always found staffing with good people to be very difficult. And I guess it's not just in the MSP sector, but I'm speaking predominantly from kind of IT support desks because it's always been the case that I've always found it very difficult. Sometimes those that are afraid with sort of fixing tech are not always that comfortable in talking to people, and and communicate, having that sort of those sort of softer skills. And that's kind of key when you're on an IT support desk, because people sometimes don't get the tech. They just want it to work, and they don't care how you get it to work. They just want you to explain it to them. So that's always been a case. And since the change in working practices, I find the training curve basically for people coming into the industry has increased. Basically, I
Yeah.
think basically putting that down because people are not immersed in the support desk anymore. People are more spread out. People are working from home. The offices are not
Yeah.
so staffed and such like. So people are not hearing, like the less experienced people are then not just hearing how the more experienced people are talking on the phone or talking to people, communicating with customers, with colleagues on the IT support desk and picking up those softer skills. I think that takes a lot longer, I think, to
Yeah.
train people up.
Yeah, I definitely think that the remote work, it does create some sort of gap in the ability to train people and the ability to have professionals learn from people who are even more professional. So I definitely
Hmm.
think that's very valid. I will just add there that this is also something which I've heard. I'm curious if you feel the same way. And I know we do have a chat here, and I'm sure there's a lot of people here who have their own experiences, a lot of IT professionals here. And one thing that I'm also hearing is that there's more and more pressure on IT professionals. Again, whether you're a corporate IT team, an IT department, or whether you're an MSP, a lot of times it's an expectation to really be a one-stop shop for everything technical. So you're responsible for the performance of devices, you're responsible for hardware, for software, and more a lot of people are saying that they're responsible also for the cyber security and the security aspect of devices. And there really is a lot of pressure on IT professionals to cover everything and to cover all their bases. And it's hard to keep up with. I've had a few MSPs and IT consultants who say that they can't even keep up with everything that's going on. So I think this would also be a nice time if there's anyone in the audience who feels like they have a particular challenge, maybe in general or currently, like over the last year or so, with a lot of changes that have happened in the world of work, what those would be. It would be interesting to see. So I really think that, there's all these challenges, whether it be the challenges of hiring and training, whether it would be the challenges of how to bring the people to the data instead of the data to the people. I really like that. As well as the challenge of all this responsibility and the fact that there's really just not enough hours in the day for anyone who works in IT. Which brings us to our next topic, which is really the importance of IT automation. Now, I want to take a step back and talk about really what is IT automation, And the way I understand it, and John, maybe tell me if you agree with this definition or not. I think it's really when you're using different technology or different tools, whatever they may be, to perform tasks that instead of having it being done on a recurring basis or on a repetitive basis by a human being, you're essentially giving it to a tool or to a program or whatever it is to do that for you. So it could be simple tasks, it could be complex tasks, but I think it could really like impact a lot of the different fields of IT, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But I'm curious if there's anything else that you think is really part and parcel of IT automations.
Well, Liz, I think I mean I've heard in the past people have been scared of IT and thinking it's going to take away jobs and things like this. You know, that sort of the automation taking away jobs and stuff. But I think it just kind of it almost enhances the jobs. I see I see somebody just posted they've grown massively over the last 2 years without employing any staff, and I'm guessing that's down to maybe automating or streamlining some of their processes. I mean, essentially, especially automation is just, again, as you mentioned it before, it's improving efficiency. So basically taking away the repetitive tasks, the repetitive mundane tasks from people, so that, as I mentioned before, like people can then focus on those aspects of the business that require those softer skills. So, speaking to customers on the phone via email, however, just communicating with customers and using those softer skills that the computers just can't do. I mean, that brings on benefits like time-saving benefits, productivity improvements that we're going to see, and I said like more time to focus on those softer skills. And again, you can push things like the compliance and security off to those bots, those automation robots, so that the people on the support desk don't have to worry about that so much.
Yeah, exactly. And I think also based on what I've heard, also again, I speak with a lot of IT professionals and a lot of our customers at Atera, and a lot of them speak about exactly that. There's so many different things that they can automate, and exactly what you were saying as far as saving time and focusing more on the interpersonal relationships. Compliance is also a very, very big factor, whether it be, just general patching and general updates. Really, it's a vital part of security, and I think it's a huge, huge need in the IT world. And I also, like you said, like what Carlton commented in our chat, and I really want to hear more about that also, is how they managed to grow 50% without any additional IT staff. It's almost like you have tools who are acting as employees in your company or acting as workers for you. So I want to speak a little bit about which areas specifically in IT you believe are best to automate. Maybe if you want to give some examples specifically of like what those areas are and how they can be automated on a high level.
Yeah, so like I said, on a high level, like I said, it's almost any repetitive task or process can pretty much be automated. But at a high level, something that we've done is the usuals like onboarding laptops, the patching side of things. When I first started with SWNS, they didn't really have a patch management process there. So a lot of the tickets that were coming into the desk were usually fixed by simply patching the machine. So by implementing some patch management, very simple automation, we cut out a large number of those tickets because the machines are already up to date. Therefore, those tickets didn't come in.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's just, I can imagine that probably lowered your workload and the load on
Absolutely.
you and anyone else in your company by at least probably 40 or 50%.
Absolutely, because I mean, you think about it, if you've got a patch, sometimes patching a machine can take some time. So, depending on how if the machine is out of date by a good few weeks, that you could lose 20, 30, 40 minutes depending on what the internet connection is of that machine, which of course, so the benefits or the gains there are almost immeasurable, by doing that proactively as opposed to reactively. Scripting again, there's various scripts and such like you can run. So we do things like maybe push out the my mind's gone blank now, the storage management in Windows. So if people are struggling with storage, we've got a script now that can push that out and configure that without actually having to connect onto the machine and do it manually. So whereas that might have taken 5 or 10 minutes by remote onto the machine, set the thing up, we can just run a script now which takes sort of 5 or 10 seconds, and things like that. And then software rollouts are another one. Again, in the past, we might have just logged onto the machine, downloaded the software, installed it, things like that. Well, now using some of the Atera tools, we can simply create a software bundle and push that out to the machine. Again, mostly in the background. We don't even have to bother the user. They just say they want it. 3 minutes later, we said it's there, and they clicked on the button.
Yeah.
and things like that. So it's unquantifiable sometimes how much the automation, these very simple automations can save you on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and it also sounds to me a lot like you're translating tasks that at one stage used to be one-to-one tasks. So one guy working on one device and updating one device, and all of a
Absolutely.
sudden you're giving someone 1,000 times more power because instead of doing everything one at a time, they can do one to 1,000, one too many, and do all these tasks en masse. And I also think that that's a huge benefit. Great. And there is just two things that I want to add. I think that's all very interesting, and this is coming a little bit more from the perspective of what I've seen with Atera. Two functionalities which I think, and it's things that we get asked a lot about. The first one is really, I think a lot of people are very interested in auto healing or self remediation. So devices have issues, there's an alert, there's a problem, and people want the computer or the device or the laptop or the server, whatever it is, to fix itself before you've even woken up and had your first cup of coffee in the morning. And that is something that, it seemed like it was a dream so many years ago, and there really are tools that are doing that. For example, let's take something very basic, such as a print spooler. A print spooler stops running and you want to restart that again. And again, you can still be sleeping while all of this is happening. There's an alert that a print spooler is down. You run a script, you get it going again within a matter of moments, and everyone's none the wiser. The work's already been done for you, and that's on a very basic level. And I think that, for example, that's just something that I've seen people do within Atera and this auto healing and the self remediation. You set everything up once, and the platform and the tools do the work for you. And also, I think now, and I'm also interested if this is something that anyone else is experiencing. I think that the new introduction of and the way that AI has blown up recently, I think is going to take automation even further. I think that another example that I will give is that we have, and this will branch a little bit more into the ticketing side of things. We have also within Atera a mechanism which it's fairly new. Obviously, it's an integration with OpenAI, and it's something that we've pushed out quite recently, but the response has been amazing. That when you have a ticket, you have AI which will automatically summarize that ticket for you and even offer a solution through a script that was also generated by AI, which is also, it's taking out a lot of the manual work that has to be done. And I think those are also just some of the ways that I've seen personally automation, in addition to, like you were saying, for onboarding, for patching. And these are really all very, very big time savers. So I think that was also quite interesting. And once again, open up this to the audience. If there's anything in particular which you think we haven't touched on or you would like to ask about, you can feel free to post it in our Q&A section or in our chat. We really would love to hear from you. Great. So I want to move on a little bit more, and I want to get into a little bit more practicalities. And this is really where we want to get your expertise, John, and maybe go into a little bit more of examples and of case studies. How would you recommend someone maybe who's just starting out in the IT industry or looking at how they can automate things a little bit more? How can you look at your current processes and know where to begin? Where does someone begin when assessing their current IT processes?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I would say is strip it right back to basics, and like you said, review your workflows, map them out. I mean, I'm still a big fan of pen and paper. I've done it in the past. I've got this big, massive roll of paper, put it on the desk, and just worked out the process, like kind of in a very basic flow chart of what happens when and where the forks are, where the conditions are, and all that sort of stuff. If you can get that down in an image, in something tangible like that, I think the automation points kind of stand out a little bit more. So you can, because then you tend to blend the workflow then lends themselves to automation. So like you could have maybe a simple autoresponder. If you get to a point in the workflow where you've got to send an email to somebody, or an email comes in and you've got to send, so you can maybe just tag in like a simple autoresponder there to say, yeah, we've got your email, we're looking at it, things like that. Tasks that might require sort of like more logical conditions pop out as well, kind of like the if this then that type stuff. All that becomes more apparent if you can see it in a picture. And I always say to start there first, and you really need to understand the processes in your mind's eye first before you even think about automating, because you need to know how everything works manually before you automate. Otherwise, if something does go wrong with the automation later on, it makes it very difficult to troubleshoot that later. So if you can run through the entire process manually, then start picking up bits, one by one. I would say to try not to automate everything at once. And, I'm a big believer in small steps. Kind of like 1% improvements every day is much better than, in my opinion, is much better than doing big changes sort of once a month, once a quarter. And you find that users tend not to push back so much on things like that, because some don't even notice that it's happening, and some just see it as a small change and they just get on with their work. But if you go in and say, right, we've got to change this whole thing because we've got this new fancy automation bot now, sometimes you'll get pushbacks like, yeah, but we've always done it this way. Why are we changing? It works, and things like that. So just drip in the automation as much as you can, and try and do it as much as you can in the background, so that the users maybe don't even know what's going on sort of in the background. They just see the improvements or the time savings in the service that you can provide them. And that's kind of it as a high level, a very high level thing is like, is map it out. Don't try and automate everything at once, and then and then do a bit at a time, do it that way. Some case studies, some things we've done in the past. I mean, I mentioned onboarding our laptops. We've got most of our software in SWNS is pretty much cloud-based or SaaS products. So there isn't a huge amount of software that we need to install on the laptops, which does lend itself to onboard it itself. But you still got to do the out of box experience and go through all that profiles in Atera. Basically, we've broken our kind of departments or our PCs down into groups or customers in Atera, and essentially when we apply or install the Atera agent into that group, basically there's a script that says when you see a new agent, there's a profile that says when you see the new agent, do this. And what that does is it basically applies all your updates, installs the software we've got, like we always put like the Chrome browser on it, Adobe Reader, very simple things like that. And then we also apply some scripts to it. So, but what that means is, as you said before, Gil, instead of a tech having to sit in front of that computer for 30, 45 minutes to set that machine up, they open out of the box, change the name for our current naming conventions and such like, install the Atera agent, and then just leave it there, move on to the next one. So we've had 5, 10, 15 laptops lined up on the boardroom table, all doing this. Whereas before, and maybe just leave them run then, and just go back and check them every so often through the day, and then once they're done, they do their restarts and all the rest of it, and that works quite well. So again, there's the time savings there.
Yeah, we like to call that set and forget. You set it up
exactly.
once, you get everything going, you have all your software ready to go, and then you can forget about it.
You just forget about it. Yeah, and then you probably close the box back up, shut it down, close it back up, and it's ready. For us, it's ready to hand over to HR to send it wherever it needs to go. Outside of Atera, something we've done before as well is with Microsoft 365, like it's simple email parser. A client had a web portal that was sending orders in to the office, and then there would literally be somebody would be sitting there. When they were sitting in front of their computer, they would then say, right, well, I need to send this to X branch. This, we're in South Wales, so that would go to the Swansea branch, that would go to the Cardiff branch, that would go to the Bridgend branch, something like that. So what we did there was basically just parse the email and look for postcodes. And then essentially as that email came into that inbox, check the postcode. Is it a Cardiff postcode? Send it to a Cardiff Teams channel. Is it a Bridgend postcode? Send it to the Bridgend Teams channel. So again, that again saved time in processing that documentation and that information, because otherwise it was waiting for that single person to be sitting on his desk to then process that. When if he's dealing with a customer or dealing with an issue, he might not get to his desk for 2 hours. There was like a small plant hire company, so he could be away from his desk for 2 or 3 hours, where of course those orders are sitting there not doing anything. Now, as they're coming in, they get sent to that particular branch where they can come in the morning or any time of the day, and they're just lined up for them. So you're cutting out that bottleneck. Bottlenecks are always a good thing to look at to automate as well. If anything you can do to remove a bottleneck using automation, it will pay for itself, tenfold in time saving.
Yeah. And I think that's very very true. It also lines up with what I've heard, and I think that that's also probably a very good step in trying to identify like another step. So you spoke about mapping out your processes and find the certain points that stand out. And then you don't want to automate everything, but you also want to do it quite slowly. And I think also identifying the bottleneck is a huge key over there. And I also really like that you brought up this example of M365 because I think that oftentimes, when we refer to IT automation, we think mainly about tasks such as, like you said, such as patching, such as software installation and getting devices set up. But a lot of people in the IT world are dealing with a whole another set of responsibilities, which comes back to ticketing and to managing a help desk and receiving requests and redirecting those requests. If you're an MSP, you probably have a full PSA, professional services uh, realm of
What?
responsibility that you're dealing with. And I also think that especially in IT, I really do think, even though it's not traditionally what we would consider IT automation, there's also a lot of automation that can be done with that, which can be a big time saver. So again, I know when a little bit more old school, you have a group of you have help desks and you have different technicians, maybe different tiers of technicians, and you might have one guy who's going through each ticket and manually assigning it to the correct person. And all of a sudden, you bring in automations where you can have tickets being automatically redirected based on a whole bunch of different factors. And that can also be a huge time saver. You come in and you have all the tickets in front of you, everything that you have to do. Um, Essentially, you have a list of things that you want to go through. And I think that can also be a really great time saver.
Yeah,
Um,
we've done something similar with that as well with the tickets coming in. So basically, we've got sort of third-party portals. So we just set them up with their own kind of email address into Atera, and then from that, then when if an alert comes in to that email address, then we can assign certain technicians to it in Atera. We can apply certain tags to it. We can do things, send them various different ways. So instead of us having to come in and see a big bank of tickets in the morning, as you said, Gila, then we can maybe already have farmed off 20, 30, 40% of those tickets to the relevant tech to deal with it as when they start the next shift.
exactly. So it's really also about keeping the work that you have to do as relevant and as focused as possible and trying to reduce the noise, of course. Um, Great. So there are just a few other things. I'm curious, John, if you've used these. These are obviously features within Atera, or maybe you've used them in a different capacity. But for example, configuration policies, I guess that's kind of how you get your devices set up. Or are there any other fields that you've managed to automate with Atera, without Atera? Are there any other tools perhaps that you think could be particularly useful for someone looking to map out their processes?
Yeah, well, within Atera, I mean, the patching is great. So, providing doing the patching automatically is great. But until you restart, when you had the desktops in the olden days before everybody was using laptops, you had desktops. It was quite straightforward for the IT departments to apply the patches because you could just restart the desktops out of hours. There's nobody there. You just schedule the restart, which we do for some of our servers now, which is great. But when people are using laptops, obviously what happens is at the end of the day, they shut laptops down, put them to sleep, whatever. They're not actually restarted. So we had a problem whereby that we were applying the patches to these laptops, but because the laptops weren't being restarted, then the patch wasn't updating properly. So what we've done is we've got a script that basically just pops up a prompt on the screen. We schedule the script using Atera automation profiles. That pops up on the screen if the laptop hasn't been restarted in 2 days. Then it pops up a screen to say, like, you haven't done it, please do it. They can do it now, schedule it, or press wait. That happens 2 or 3 times a week. And then we've got another one then that basically says at the end of the week, if they haven't restarted the laptop within 4 days, then it gives them the same option, but doesn't allow them to wait. They've either got to do it now, or they've got to
Yeah,
schedule it for 4 o'clock. So that's
yeah,
helped us a lot by forcing
yeah,
people. And again, that has also stopped some tickets coming into the desk, because very often we get tickets in the desk saying, "Oh, this isn't working. That's not working. My camera, my mic, my something." And typically we'll look at the top of the agent profile in Atera saying, "Oh, this laptop hasn't been restarted for 3 weeks." So
yeah,
that's the first point of call. restart your laptop, and then within 5 minutes they're well. Depending on how many updates they've got, it could be 5 minutes, it could be 20 minutes before it restarts, and they can say, "Oh, it's
Yeah.
all working again." So things like that. Again, look for proactive measures to try and prevent those tickets coming in the first place. And that's something else we've done by using scripting and Atera automation profiles. Within 365, there's a whole plethora of things you can use within 365 to help automating. All the apps you've got that link into Teams, the Microsoft booking side of things to help you book, much like Calendly and stuff. As you can probably guess, I'm kind of a Microsoft head, but it's where I've been most of my professional career. But there's other solutions out there as well, non-Microsoft solutions that do very much the same thing, like using the calendar booking apps. That's a very simple automation. Instead of you going, email tennis or telephone tennis, trying to get a schedule in your calendar, you can
By the
just
time someone
send
responds
a
to
link
the
out.
email, the date that you offered has already passed.
It's gone. Exactly, it's gone. So just show them the gaps in your calendar and let them book it. Let them book it themselves. That's another massive time saver that again is included in most Microsoft 365 licenses. And you've got other things like Calendly, and I'm sure there's others out there that'll do the same thing as well.
Yeah.
And they all plug into 365, Google, and things like that. So there's lots of little things, quite high level automations you can do that can really pay dividends in time saving and
It's the little things, and they have a big impact at the end of the day.
The little things. I think it's the little things because you do them so often.
Yeah.
They don't take long, but you do them a lot.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you one more question, maybe before we go to our Q&A. Maybe tell us, I think this is always interesting, something to learn from. Was there anything perhaps you try to automate or something that you try to implement and it was a bit of an error or a bit of a fail, as we say? Maybe something that you learned not to do?
We've had a few fails, but fails. It's just a moment to learn. I think it's just a learning curve. I mean, if I go back to the script I just mentioned on the restarts, maybe that didn't start off, wasn't quite as smooth as it is now, whereby we were getting a few issues whereby people were saying, "Oh, my laptop restarted while I was in the middle of a Teams call," and things like that. So there is things they do have to be tested. And some of the auto healing scripts that maybe you've mentioned as well, they need to be tested to the end, because they can actually cause, they could potentially cause more hassle than they're trying to save, if they go wrong. But it's just be mindful of what you're doing and make sure it's tested in hopefully a product,
a low
live
state
environment. Yeah, exactly, and things like that. So just be mindful of what it is, and I think that goes back to knowing what you're automating from the beginning. If you've got that flow mapped out, then and you can see it, in front of you on a bit of paper or on a, in a OneNote page or a note on your screen or something, then those things tend to become more apparent.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, I think that's also, like, to summarize that in a point, it's pretty much trial and error. Obviously, you want to work, you want to try and automate things, but you probably will make some mistakes on the way in the process of finding the best thing that works for you. And I think that's very important. Great. Thank you so much, John. I do see we have some questions, and I do want to leave some time for that. We still have about 10 minutes left. So before we jump into our questions, I do want to share with everyone on the line. Coming up, we have a virtual, it's called a Ateraverse. It's a virtual event like no other. It will be happening on May 3 and 4, and there's going to be very focused content for IT professionals. We're really going to focus on very interesting IT topics and how to ensure that your IT operations are ready for the future of IT. We'll also be dealing a lot with cybersecurity and getting a lot of very professional advice and professional discussions. If you want to register for that, there is a banner at the top of the page, a pink banner that's flowing, so you can feel free to click on that and save your spot. And I think that will be very, very exciting. And hopefully they will get some more tips and tricks. On that note, I want to move into our live Q&A. I'm sure a lot of these will be directed at John, and maybe we'll also promote a little bit of a discussion. So first of all, let's start with a very interesting question. How can organizations measure the ROI of IT automation? That's a tricky question, John. I'm curious to
Oh,
see what you would say about that. They're coming in
I
straight with
guess,
the hard ones.
yeah, yeah. I guess the usual IT response is, I guess it depends, you know. So it depends on where you are. Like for example, as I mentioned, the onboarding side of things, that was quite a tangible thing. We knew how long it was taking us to to roll out that particular, but to complete that particular task. You can say, right, it takes one technician, for argument's sake, 45 minutes to patch a device, for argument's sake. So if you can then do, by applying the automation and the patch management and the IT profiles within Atera, you can finish five laptops, within half a day, while also still looking at your tickets and doing your tickets and doing other tasks, because you're not having to watch them so much or go back and forth, click there, to do this, click restarts and all the rest of it. Then I suppose something like that's quite tangible. You could work out how much that's gonna save you. There's
So
things like
essentially, it's a saving of time, which you would then translate into a saving of
yeah,
anything else. Yeah.
because it's what else you're going to do with that time then. That's where the key comes in. If you're not having to sit in front of a laptop clicking buttons, which is quite mundane and not very, it's not really going to give you much fulfillment in your day, then it depends what you're going to reuse that time for. I mean, things I've done in the past as well is in the financial side of things. When using financial software, you can do things like, instead of having to type in the invoices and things like that manually, you can scan them into things,
Yeah.
and you can automate your collections process by plugging in maybe a direct debiting system that can read your invoices, go and collect the money on the due date, and then reconcile it with, to then chase that information manually and do credit control and things like that. Something I've not mentioned yet, which is something I used a lot of in the MSP. I mean, that transformed our cash flow. From literally from paying salaries out of an overdraft to paying salaries out of money in the bank. It was night and day when we moved to that, and it cut our credit control processes drastically, and we found that a lot of the clients were welcomed it, because it also saved time their end as well, because they then weren't having to process those invoices, especially
Yeah.
those monthly ones. They knew that the invoice comes in on the 1st, the money's going to go out on the 14th. So
Yeah.
it's time saving from your side and from your
Yeah.
client side as well, and it just makes you look a little bit more efficient.
Definitely, definitely. That's why I was
So
saying I think we can translate it everything from the management of the devices to the repairing of the devices, or the remediation, to the ticketing, to the billing, really across the whole scope of IT work. These
yeah,
things can be automated.
and to the collections of that money afterwards. That's the key, especially for MSPs. you know,
Yeah, that will increase your ROI being paid.
absolutely.
Right. Okay, cool. Now, next question that we have, this is probably a little bit more of an Atera question, so maybe I will take it. What connectivity and automation can Atera do with mobile devices, such as Android and iPad and non-Windows devices? Um, so at the moment, Atera does not support mobile device management. Currently, we're only compatible with, we have a Windows agent, a Mac agent, and a Linux agent. It is actually something that we're working on, so stay tuned. There's very exciting things coming, and we really understand the need as we're moving to a more and more mobile world. We really understand the need to be able to support Android and to be able to support iOS. So currently, there's not really anything that we can do proactively at the moment, but that is something that's on our roadmap. So thank you very much, Paul, for that question. It's a great question and a relevant question. And hopefully next time you join one of our webinars, we'll have more exciting news to share. Great. Next, we have a question. What are some of the most common challenges you see organizations face when implementing IT automation, and how can they be overcome? So I think this touches back to what we spoke about earlier. But John, what would you say, based on what you've seen either in your own organization or else externally, what are the most common challenges?
The first thing that came to my mind when you read that one, I think, is trust. To be honest with you, is trusting the process. I think that's one of the big challenges to get over, especially if you're coming from an MSP to a kind of a non-technical client. Is convincing them that this is going to work for them and improve things, as opposed, because you get, you get the old adage, like, but we've always done it this way and it works. Yes. Yeah, and it's kind of difficult to come away from that, because they're right. That you can't argue with the fact that this is what they've done and it is working for them. So I think it's just kind of trying to convince them that automation is gonna improve things for them. And I think that's where we come into to get past it. I think that's where we come into is mapping those flows out, show them, map it out with them, show them what the process is, and then you might be able to, then they might even be able to spot then, or that bit there takes me, I've got to do that 10 times a day and it takes me 15 minutes or 10 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever it is. And you can say, well, if we did this, then you won't have to do that anymore.
Yeah.
And sometimes that kind of it's like, again, it comes back again to what I said before, is those small improvements, that 1% change, that regular
Exactly.
1% change. Because if you make a 1% change every day, by the end of the month, you potentially changed a 30-year system. So and
Yeah.
you've kind of like almost trickled that in. So there's less, again, come back. There's less of a pushback. But I think it's
Yeah.
trying to get the non-technical person. I think that's one of the biggest challenges in IT automation. Trying to get the non-technical person to understand the benefits and to put trust in the system.
Yeah. And I think really to summarize what you just said, and it's something that I think can be felt in all organizations, IT or non-IT, is in general there's a little bit of a resistance to change. And so I think the advice that you gave of really breaking it down into small bits and implementing change a little bit at a time creates much more of an acceptance for that change, let's
Yeah,
just say.
yeah,
Um, and more openness towards it, and more of an ability to accept that change. And I think that I will just add to that that there is I don't know if it's necessarily a challenge, but maybe more of an occurrence that I see happening. That I think that when implementing any sort of process or redoing processes and implementing IT automation or anything, it requires a lot of time to set up. And people oftentimes start that process, but they don't always see it fully through because it's taking a long time initially. But I think that another thing that people have to overcome is really understanding that even though there is an initial setup and it will take some time to get that initial setup going, that initial investment will pay off in much easier maintenance down the line.
mm,
So really take the time to invest in things, to build them up properly. As John said, to go through each of your processes and map them out, find your bottlenecks, and then understand that this is really an investment for the future. Whether it be investing in tools, whether it be investing in the correct, maybe some form of consulting to see how to get things better, and really just investing in things that long term will make your life and will make your job easier and will make you and your staff happier.
definitely. I
Um,
think
okay.
I
I
think
just
it's I
wanted
think
to
it's key. Sorry,
I
Gila.
just
I
want to
think it's
answer
key
one
as.
thing. Sorry. I see there was a
Sorry, go
question
for it. Yeah.
about a recording. This session is being recorded. So if anyone missed that. Yes, John, please.
No, so when we mentioned about mapping out the workflows as well, I think it is key to say to map out the workflows as they are now. Don't try and automate them as you're mapping them out, because that
Don't
you
do two
sometimes you
things
can
at
get,
once.
yeah, you can get lost. You can get lost then. So map it out as it is now, and then move on to looking for the automation points.
Yeah, that's great. Exactly. I think that's also another mistake that people make. They try to solve things while they're still trying to understand them.
Yeah.
And it's better to get that better overview first. Um, okay, I do see we have, I don't see any other questions necessarily related to what John is saying. I do see there is I just want to check in the chat. Okay, we do have, okay, Paul had a question. John, what are you using for mobile device management? Are you using anything?
To be honest, we've just recently implemented something. We use, Microsoft again. We're using Intune. We've just rolled that out. We've got a few. We've got our creatives in the business, our video editors and such like, using Apple Macs. So, and we've just taken on some iPads and such like. I've tried to avoid them for a while, but they're coming in more. People are finding use. So we enrolled them. We're using Apple Business Manager and Microsoft Intune. I think it's still called Intune. or endpoint manager. So that's what we're using now. But it's kind of in our infancy there, to be honest. So we haven't done a great deal with it, but that's what we're starting to use. There are other solutions out there as well that work just as well.
Yeah, great. I've also heard of a number of different solutions. And as I mentioned, that is something that it's something that we hear coming up more and more. Okay, there was a question from Brian. I know this is a little bit more of an Atera question, asking what safeguards there are to prevent AI from running malicious scripts through Atera. Brian, I want to make sure that you get the best answer possible. So I'm going to ask you, you can send me personally an email at gila@atera.com, and it's GILA@atera.com. And on that note, if anyone here has a question relating to Atera, you can feel free to email me, and I will make sure that you get all the information you need about all the security measures that we have in place to prevent AI through Atera from doing anything malicious. We really take our security of the platform very seriously. We invest a lot in it, and to really ensure that there's nothing malicious happening through Atera. And then last question before we say thank you and end off. Does Atera have the ability to map IT automation processes? If not, any suggestions? So currently within Atera, you can create automations. It's not really possible to map out those processes. But John, maybe you can give some insight here about how you would map out those processes. I know you mentioned pen and paper, but maybe you have another suggestion.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to that. I mean, you don't have to go to pen and paper. It depends how complex the problem is. But the problem getting software to do that for you is kind of like where does it start, sort of thing, because until you've got the process mapped, then the automation software doesn't know doesn't know what to do, sort of thing, So it's very difficult, in my opinion, to get something to do it for you, because usually when you're trying to automate something, it's a manual process that somebody knows how it works. So you've always got to get it out of somebody's brain onto paper or into the computer to then be able to automate it. So I think that might be quite a difficult thing to do. There might be cleverer people out there than me that know how to do something like that, but something we have used. Gila mentioned the OpenAI. We've used the OpenAI interface in the scripting section of Atera, and that has mapped out some scripts or produced some scripts for us that I would normally have had to go to Google to produce and pull together, and build my own. But just simply putting in what you want, and I would say at least 80% of the time it's come out with something usable. So I've not given it anything too complicated as yet, but that is something that can help you generate your scripts. It's not quite automation, but it's getting there. So then you just put in your question into the creations type, exactly, and that has saved me maybe an hour of Googling to get that script done, and it's given me something in a few minutes.
Great.
I hope that helps. It's not really an answer, but
I think also a big part of this is each person having to find the method that works best for them. So we really, really appreciate your advice that you've given us so far. I really just want to thank you, John, for joining us. I really enjoyed this discussion. I learned a lot. I've taken a lot of notes, by the way. I hope everyone else did. A little bit of notes that I can share with other people that I speak to. I also want to thank everyone for joining us. Please, if you have any further questions, we would love to hear from you. If you have any information you would like to know, whether it's about Atera, whether it's about other webinars that we hold, whether it's about the Ateraverse virtual event that we're having, please feel free to reach out. And once again, thank you very, very much, John, for sharing your expertise, for sharing your tips and tricks. And everyone, John Merrick from SWNS
thank you.
Media.
My pleasure.
And thank you very much, everyone. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.
Take care. Thank you. Hope it's helpful.
Definitely.